What do you get when you cross a Ford F-150 pickup truck with the pharmaceutical drug Adderall? A Ford Focus.
The topic of today's discussion is, for a biotech company, what is the right time to implement a CLM solution? CLM is contract lifecycle management, products like Agiloft. So typical life cycle of a biotech is, they go through this drug discovery stage of their lives. We're trying to find the right molecule.
They invent something that cutting edge. Wow. Look at the microscope.
Exactly. When discover, now a lot of them are using AI to narrow down from that pool of molecules, what for a particular disease that they can target with a medicine. After that, once they find something promising, one molecule, set of molecules, they go through this preclinical research, trying to figure out whatever they're trying to develop, would it cause harm? And how would body react to it? Because body is also pretty smart. It sees a foreign body, it goes after it. So they look at both sides of it. It kind of helps them figure out whether this is going to be a pill, it's going to be something you have to inject. A lot of information comes out of that, part of their the life cycle of a biotech. Then comes the clinical research. This is when, they look at safety, they look at efficacy, they look at how people react to it. Healthy people, unhealthy people, people have that medicine. There's like a whole...
Well, they also got to do a whole demographics study to see what the, what the cohort population out there could possibly be. I mean, is this particular drug going after an indication that's widespread? Is it boutique?
Yeah.
Where is your... you hate to say this, where's your best value for the dollar to be spent?
Yeah, where most patients can be helped. Like sometimes it's, so you go international at this stage, right? You look everywhere. Yeah. Find the right people and it's a very, extensive and expensive phase. So we're going to come back to that. Extensive and expensive. Then, of course, once you have your stuff ready, you file a new drug application with the FDA. They review your results, they review your processes, they review everything and anything that they can get their hands on to make sure that once this drug is out there in the market, that it's safe, it does what it's supposed to do, and and then after that, they keep monitoring it. When you go live, they monitor, you have inspections, people show up at their door to see that, you are doing what you said you were doing. So having your documents in the right place, easily accessible, it's very critical at pretty much all of these stages. But the big question, Andy, is when is the right time for a biotech to implement a CLM solution, right? It's a very expensive, billions of dollars are spent on this. So when has our experience been? Before you start, just to add, Sequent has done majority of their Agiloft implementations, I think almost 60 of them in the biotech space. So we're talking, based on our experience in implementing Agiloft in this particular space. So just want to add that.
Well, the one thing I would like to caution to everybody that's watching or listening to this is the overview that CJ gave about how this gets started all the way up to the FDA making sure that it's safe for us to use is a long, arduous, and expensive process. It could be decades. There were studies years ago where, the average drug would take 15 to 20 years to get approved. I think there have been studies out there that have used, target dollars that the average cost for a drug approval is around $2 billion from start to finish. So this is a long process. There's many different stages in this, and it all comes down to I think the brilliance of these scientists that are discovering these treatments that can be used for humanity. But there are mechanisms that have to be in place for this to happen. And, I think one of the things that we've seen is for these early stage companies, making the decision to spend on things that are not related specifically to the drug itself. You have to look like a big player in order to become a big player. And what does that mean? That means investment in systems, in applications, in platforms. And many of these biotech companies, they exist for the ideal of humanity, but at the end of the day, they also have the ability to, for acquisition. There are shareholders that are funding most of these startups. They're into this for when is it the right time to where maybe one of the big players will come in and to buy this particular product and be able to take it to market. Very few biotech companies can actually take a product all the way to market. Most of these products, as they reach phase 2 and phase 3 successes, will be bought by a larger entity. But in order for that due diligence to happen, you've got to have your act together. So I think one of the things that we've seen with the CLM is all the way through from when the drug discovery happens and all the way up to your first taste of getting into clinical trials, you're spending money. You're spending money that you're not a revenue generating company at that point. So you have to spend the right money at the right time.
I mean, they typically spend about 10%. Like if you look at the overall cost, general numbers are like about 10% are spent before you go to trial, right?
10% of all the dollars are usually allocated to the product itself, around phase 1. You get up to 20, 25%, 30% when you're in phase 2. And then your trials can cost upward of about 50% of your budget when you're in phase 3. So you have more money to spend on infrastructure and good practices and procedures earlier in your drug development. So what we like to see is getting your act together, prior to phase 1 or when you're in a phase 1, the clinical program, because you're starting to not pretend, but you're starting to act like you will have to act under the FDA guidelines when you reach phase 2 and above.
And I think to one point to that is when you're about to get into that bigger spend, you have to have your processes in place. You have to have your documents in place because speed is of the essence. Like once you have something, the one way to save money is to do it faster. Right. So if your contracting is taking time, if your dollar approvals are taking time, that's time that's not being spent to bring drug to market. So yeah. I think so. You're right, Andy. Like it's at that stage that you got to just get your act together and be ready for that big spend.
Well, you get into phase 2 and now you're playing with some big boys.
Yeah,
and
big numbers.
And if your contracts are scattered and you don't have a well-maintained, organized, searchable repository for all the contracts that you've generated up to that point, making sure that all your NDAs are intact, that you haven't signed an inappropriate NDA or a conflict of interest NDA from one supplier to another supplier that could potentially be harmful to a potential acquisition of your own company. I mean, so getting in control of your contracts and who your suppliers are and making sure that your intellectual property is protected is absolutely critical. And, looking at, an Agiloft solution, I think out of the 60 or so implementations that we've done in the biotech space, just a handful had an actual commercial product at that moment. So all of these implementations that we've done have been in the clinical stage area, and we're seeing, the impetus to put in the right CLM at the right time. If you've got a product in phase 1 and you're getting ready to go to phase 2, because you have to have your act together when you're in phase 2.
I mean, this also flows into, the big focus of biotech at that stage is having good practices, right? So they talk about GXP, even though a CLM system doesn't fit into because you don't have patient data, all that stuff in these systems, or your trial data, but it shows the good practice mentality in a company, right?
It's getting your company ready for the cultural shift when you have to become a full-blown GXP organization.
Yeah. So this is part of it.
Good practices in legal and in the CLM space equate to good practices within your quality system and your regulatory space.
Yeah, I mean, what this also does is puts your data in one place. So if you have a supplier that you have, let's say, in your trial management system, right? You want to make sure that profile, that information is also available in your CLM system, so that you have your legal ducks in a row, right? Because a lot of stuff can happen. So so overall, high data quality is one of the key pillars of biotechs, and this fits right into it. And you get the right data then, because most cases the supplier information goes into a CLM first, because you have to sign your NDAs and your CDAs, get that in there before you go into any types of a financial agreement with them. So this is where it starts. So if it starts well, then it will flow to the rest of your ecosystem of systems within your company, and this becomes a hub where information comes in and spreads.
Well, one of the trends that we're also seeing with this is just because you're an early stage company and you might not have a defined workflow or a life cycle for getting your contracts approved, doesn't mean that you can't put in Agiloft as a repository to start low. Start small, create a structured repository that is database driven, and slowly adapt to, okay, I have my repository organized, I can search, I can find whatever I need to find very quick. And then as your company matures and you start growing and expanding, now you start to activate some workflows. You start to activate some pre-approvals. Maybe the finance department has to take a look at this before we take it to the next step. Then you start to really evolve your own process, and then Agiloft can adapt to that larger audience.
I mean, you can literally...
You start small and then you end up global.
I mean, you can literally, just the way you have phases in a clinical trial, you can have phases in your CLM implementation, and then it's growing with you. When you buy them, you're not buying like a boxed system, right? You're buying a platform that can grow with you, and this is where we come in. We help you in whatever stage of life you're in.
The right size for the right time.
Right size for the right time, and specifically for biotech, there's actually pretty good guidance you have in your drug development process as where this fits in. Right at that phase 1, phase 2 time when the spend is about to get bigger, you want to be in the right place before the bigger spend comes in, and then have the system grow with you. You grow global, you add other units. You acquire a company, let's say in somewhere in Europe or Asia, you can add them to this, right? It's quick add-ons that can happen. So I think this is this is a good story for a biotech as to how they can look at their own drug development life cycle and match it to the CLM life cycle.
They could also just give us a holler, and we can help with the justification. If you're having a hard time justifying something internally, give us a call. We'll be more than happy to help.
Share our experience. All right. Thank you, sir.
Well, before we go, I got to get in my pickup truck and go home.
Oh,
see you later.
Take care.